Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Stephanie Norwood-Wayne, a 14-year educator with 10 years in our great Tupelo Public School District, where I teach ELA and history. Currently, I also serve as president of the Tupelo Association of Educators, and I also serve as a board member for the Northeast region on the Mississippi Association of Educators. On behalf of the Tupelo Association of Educators and MAE, I welcome you to this evening's community briefing titled, Strengthen Our Schools, Keep the Promise to Fully Fund Public Education. This evening, we will hear from state and local leaders who are in public education, and they will discuss the many negative impacts associated with the underfunding of our schools. And now, it is my honor to introduce to you our esteemed co-sponsor of this event, a man whose commitment to public education is known throughout our Tupelo Public School District and our Tupelo Strong community. Because of him, this event has been made possible. So I present to you the Honorable Jason Shelter, Mayor of Tupelo.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's certainly my honor and privilege to be able to help facilitate this event tonight to promote public education. The fact that my blue and gold tie is on is no accident. We think very fondly of our public schools here in Tupelo and very proud to passionately support that. Just want to, on behalf of the City of Tupelo, welcome you to our council chambers tonight and thank you for being here for this, to show your public support and your commitment to public education. I do want to especially recognize two of our council members here, Miss Nettie Davis and Coach Travis Beard. Not only are they members of the Tupelo City Council, but they're both retired educators, longtime educators in the Tupelo Public School District. Miss Chelsea Rick, Miss Mississippi, is here. She is a passionate advocate of education. Reverend Traylor, president of NAACP here in Lee County, is here, and one of my fellow mayors, Mr. Robert Trice, is here, along with several of our school board members and past and present school board members. And last but not least, I see a lot of school teachers here tonight, and current and retired school teachers. And other than that making me a little nervous that I'm going to get graded on my presentation, it's exciting to see you here. And thank you. I think we're going to have a wonderful forum tonight. Thank you again for being here. And I think at this time, to introduce Mr. Kevin Gilbert, is a member of the Executive Committee with the National Education Association and the Clinton Public School District, past president of the Mississippi Association of Educators and the coordinator of teacher leadership and special projects with the Clinton Public School District, who will be our moderator tonight. Please help me welcome Mr. Kevin Gilbert.
All right. Good evening. How are we doing this evening? Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that great introduction. I need to take you around the country with me, too. That was great. Matter of fact, I want to thank all of our participants for being on our panel today, as well as I want to thank you for being here in the audience today. Thanks again to the Mississippi Association of Educators and to the City of Tupelo for putting on, and the Tupelo Association of Educators for putting on and sponsoring this great event. Because where the community and our schools come together, what a powerful force that it can be. And so I'm excited about the dialogue that will be presented for us this evening. We do have a special panel for you today, and I'm just going to go through their names so you can know who's sitting on the panel. Let them wave at you, and then we're going to begin our presentations, and then following which we will have a question and answer period. We have Representative Cecil Brown from Jackson, Beverly Brand from the Associate Director for the Mississippi Association of Educators, Mr. Gerald Loden, Tupelo School District Superintendent, and I just learned the Superintendent of the Year. Let's give him a round of applause for that outstanding job. Appreciate your efforts and your work. Mr. Jimmy Weeks, Lee County School District Superintendent. Michael Cates, Nettleton School District Superintendent, our mayor, the mayor of Tupelo, who just did a wonderful welcome, and Casey Grist with Better Schools and Better Jobs. All right, very good. They're excited and they're ready to go, and I'm not going to prolong this any further. So each panelist will have about 5 minutes to go through their presentation, with the exception of Ms. Brand, who we'll give her 10 minutes, because she's supposed to have a whole wealth of knowledge for us. Wouldn't be biased that way, now would we? But yes. All right, and so our first panelist is Representative Cecil Brown, who will talk to us about state funds that could be used for public education. So take it away, sir.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank all of you for coming out, and thanks to the mayor and the city council for allowing us to use this great facility. What a beautiful building this is. I know you're proud of it and proud of your city. It's a great place. Thank you again for being here. This is an important meeting, not just for Tupelo and for Lee County, but for the state of Mississippi. You're going to have the opportunity next year to vote on something, on a constitutional amendment that has a chance to change the direction of education in this state, change it in a positive manner. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. I think Casey Grist on the other end of the table down there is going to give you a little information about that. I want to start out by talking about sort of where we are. You hear a lot of talk about MAEP. It's really the Mississippi Adequate Education Program, MAEP. It's a program that was passed by the legislature in 1997. It was designed to provide enough money to school districts to give every child the opportunity to have an adequate education, not a super education, not a terrific education, not the best education in the country, but just sort of the minimum level adequate education. That law has been on the books since 1997. As I mentioned, it was passed again by the legislature with the agreement of Governor Barber. When he was governor, we reinstituted that program again, but since it's been on the books, it's only been fully funded twice. Currently, it's underfunded by about 12%. $257 million is the amount of the underfunding for the current year, and that means that every school district is getting 12% less money from the state of Mississippi than was promised in 1997 and again under Governor Barber. Over the last 12 years, there have been a total underfunding of some $1.8 billion statewide, $1.8 billion. When you translate that in, and these school superintendents are going to tell you a little bit about the impact it's having on their districts, but when you translate that down, let me talk to you about your household. Suppose somebody came in tomorrow and said, we're going to cut your household budget by 12%. What would you start cutting? Well, you could cut for a while. You might have a little money in savings, or you might be able to use your credit card or whatever, but at some point in time, you're going to run out of those options out there, and you're going to have to start doing some pretty drastic things. You may even have to sell your house. You may have to get a second job. There are lots of things you can do. Well, that's what's happening with school districts. They're in that same situation where they have had to lay off teachers, lay off administrative personnel, shut down some of their programs, in some cases ban, whatever it might be. Those arts and things that are very important to children, they've had to do that. Now, the money is available. The U.S. economy and the state of Mississippi's economy went into a recession beginning in 2007. It was in a very desperate situation, very big recession, and state budgets were cut, the national budgets were cut, and things had to be done. And so MAP was not fully funded. But we are now out of that recession. We've been out of the recession for 4 years now, almost 5 years now. We've been out of the recession, and money is available to fully fund MAP. But the leadership in the state legislature, and I am in the state legislature, the leadership in the state legislature and the governor's office and lieutenant governor have chosen not to pursue funding MAEP. Now, those of us who support funding MAEP will say it would be very difficult to make up $257 million in 1 year, but there is money there to begin to cut away at the shortfall. We need to, if we don't start dealing with the shortfall in education, then schools are going to run out of their reserve money. They're going to see continued layoff of teachers, no new computers in the schools, lots of things, bad things will happen to the schools. So what am I talking about? What chance are you going to have to turn that around? Well, there's going to be on the ballot in the 2015, next year's general election, There will be a proposal to amend the state constitution, and Casey's going to discuss it in detail exactly what the language is going to be, but it will basically require the legislature to do what it already has said it's going to do, and that is to fully fund education. The initiative does not mention MAEP. You're going to hear from some of the opposition, people that are going to be opposed to this initiative. You're going to hear some things that are simply not true, and let me give you a couple of those things. You're going to hear that this initiative would limit the legislature's discretion to fund public schools. It would take all the legislature's discretion away from them. Well, in part, that's true, and that's a good thing, because they hadn't done it yet. So if they're not doing it, it needs to be done, why wouldn't you take it away from them? But it doesn't take total discretion away from it. It simply says that there should be enough money provided by the legislature to fully fund education. It will be up to the legislature to determine how much that is. There is no dollar amount in the initiative at all. It will be up to the legislature to interpret the ballot initiative to say this is what full funding is required. They may say MAEP, they may say something else. They can change MAEP. They can cut the amount, but they must provide adequate resources to the public schools. The second thing you're going to hear is that it's going to turn the implementation of the law over to a chancery judge in Jackson, Mississippi. That is simply not true. Now, what they're talking about is that they think that this is setting up a lawsuit so that people can sue to enforce the constitutional amendment. Well, folks, we already have a lawsuit. Governor Musgrove and 21 school districts have already sued the state of Mississippi saying you've got to fully fund education. So we're not talking about a lawsuit. The lawsuit already exists. This is something completely separate and apart from any lawsuit whatsoever. And oh, by the way, if there was a lawsuit and if it did go to a chancery judge, it certainly would not stop there. It would go all the way up to the Mississippi Supreme Court. So that's just a bogus argument. People are saying you don't want to turn it over to a chancery judge in Jackson. Well, you're not doing that. First of all, there would have to be a lawsuit. Secondly, there had to be a decision, an adverse decision by the Chancery Court, and then it would have to go all the way to the state Supreme Court. So don't be fooled by this argument about turning it over to some judge in Jackson. Thirdly, you're going to hear that this proposal would take money from the other education institutions, your four-year colleges and your community colleges. This is an argument that the Lieutenant Governor has been making very publicly. It's going to take all the money out of IHL, all the money out of community colleges. That's not true either. The proposal, if you read the ballot carefully, the proposed method of funding this initiative is to take 25% of new revenue that comes into the state and use that to cut down the shortfall. If we do that, the projections are it will take 7 years to fully fund MAEP, but it is a start. It'll take 7 years to do it using only 25% of new money. That leaves 75% of all new money to fund everything else, additional new programs. Not a tax increase. There's no tax increase proposed in this. This will not create a tax increase. There's no proposal for new taxes on this. It's taking whatever new money comes into the state. Now, state revenues grow at the annualized rate of about 3% a year and have done that for about 15 years. We've had ups and we've had down. We've had 5% up. We've had 2% down. But on average, it's been about 3%. If we take 3% of the new money, that's about $180 million in new money per year, and we take 25% of $180 million, we're only talking about $45 million to start cutting down the shortfall. So the rest of that money would go to any new programs at IHL, any new programs at community college, whatever the legislature decided to spend it on, but it is not soaking up all of the new money that comes into the state of Mississippi. That is not the proposal. One of the other things you hear, and I saw a column about that this morning, they say, well, we need to stop throwing money at education. Well, folks, I heard somebody say one time, if you don't like the idea of throwing money at public education, maybe you ought to just try it. We haven't tried that. We have never done that. We are not throwing money at public education. I think these superintendents will tell you that, and Beverly can tell you that. We are one of the lowest rated. We have one of the lowest rated school systems in the country statewide. We all know that in terms of performance. But why do we have that? Remember now, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program was to provide enough money for an adequate education. So if we're not fully funding MAEP, and MAEP is what it takes to fund an adequate education, Where does that leave us? An inadequate education. That's what the legislature itself said. If you don't do this, you're not providing enough money for an adequate education. And we have, since 1997, not provided enough money for an adequate education. I think I'm probably out of my 5 minutes, maybe longer than that. I'm going to stop right here, unless somebody wants to give me some of their time. No, I'm kidding. Thank you all again for having. I see Anna Maria going like that.
All right, thank you very much, Representative Brown, and we will have plenty of opportunities to ask you some questions about some of the materials that you gave. You know, there's strength in having information, and being able to have information at your fingertips is something that's very important. And on the screen before you, we want to see you a tool that is being used across this state, and we hope that you would use it as well. It's found at keeppublicschoolspublic.com. It's a website that just disappeared from the screen. There it is. All right. And as you can see, it provides you a great opportunity to go real deep into the numbers and see the total impact of some of the things that are happening. For example, you see there's a list of the state underfunding the school districts and how much they've been underfunded from the MAEP. You could click on one of those school districts, I believe, and it should highlight for you not only the number that's underfunded, but you can see something that shows how many teachers could be hired, and if that school district had the necessary funds, how many iPads and MacBooks. That interactive map there with the dots, you can punch on one of those dots, and you can see right there, it's Tupelo School District. If you go back up to there you go, Tupelo School District. It gives you everything you need to know. It shows you how much they were totally underfunded. It shows you, how many additional teachers, what kind of iPads and things can be purchased with that number. And as we always say, there's power in being able to give out the information that you need. There's also a wonderful graph in there. If you go to it, it shows you, there it is right there, $1.5 billion, and it shows you all the things that are affected by that gross underfunding of our schools. And so we encourage you to go to keeppublicschools.com. We ask you the Mississippi Association of Educators is providing this website for you so that you can have the numbers, you can have the data and the information, so that when people try to hit you with some of this information that Representative Brown, you can come back with them and say, that's not necessarily true. And this is where it's right there at your fingertips. And so we hope that you would go to that website, utilize it, and get the information that you need. With that being said, not to prolong the time, we're going to move now to the Associate Director of the Mississippi Association of Educators, Beverly Brand, who is going to talk to us a little bit about what that underfunding looks at through the eyes of our educators.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Good evening. It's so great to be here. I'm honored to be with you, and thank Mayor Shelton and the City of Tupelo and the Tupelo Association of Educators for bringing us together today. And you know, one of the main things when we talk about short school funding shortfalls, we're talking about a quality of life issue, not just for our students and our schools, but where you have a good, strong school, you have a strong community. And when the MAEP is underfunded, then it affects the quality of life for everyone in the community. I am Beverly Brand, a middle school teacher from the Jackson Public School District, and I've been out of the classroom working with educators across the state with the Mississippi Association of Educators. And I've had the privilege of traveling throughout the state and learned so many lessons talking with educators, administrators, parents, and families, and walking through visiting a lot of schools and campuses. And today I want to share with you some of the things that we as educators see. Maybe not in your community here, however, if it happens anywhere in Mississippi, it affects every one of us. And the hardships when the state leadership doesn't keep their promise, it's our students who lose out. It's our students who are faced with the hardships when our leaders don't fund public education. We know as educators that our students are future mechanics, hairstylists, doctors, attorneys, firemen, policemen, and the artists of our future. And while the problems of underfunding are different in every district, big districts, small districts, everyone struggles with the hard decisions that Representative Brown was talking about. And I want to paint a picture for you quickly of what we've seen from the Gulf Coast to the capital city, from the Delta to the Tennessee and Alabama borders. And I invite you to imagine your child or your grandchild or any Mississippi child trying to learn under some of these conditions. Leaky roofs. In a lot of schools across our state, every time it rains, a teacher has to get the bucket to catch the water. There's no money to fix the roof. And some schools still have window units instead of central heat and air. And some of the window units, again, are ancient, archaic, and are unable to be repaired. So imagine how hard it is in the heat for students to pay attention in some of those conditions. I've seen 27 kindergarten students in a classroom with no teacher assistant. Some of these students went to pre-K, some of these students did not go to pre-K, and that's the same with a lot of first grade classrooms as well. Some students, children begin school, they don't know colors, shapes, numbers, or their full name. And we know that 2/3 of Mississippi's young learners start the school year unprepared. So we have those issues inherent, which then begin to be more profoundly affected by a lack of adequate resources. Mississippi does not require students to go to kindergarten. So the Mississippi Association of Educators, we support requiring kindergarten for all students. We know that students who attend kindergarten are more likely to graduate from high school. So we have a legislative initiative, and it's called the KIDS Act. Kindergarten increases diplomas, and that's going to be one of our focuses this year. What about Common Core? And what about all of the new academic reforms and things that are being asked of our students and our educators? Some schools have been working on this, implementing and building curriculum for quite a few years. They have excellent textbooks and resources and materials, and there are many, many, many schools across the state that do not have the funding to be able to provide quality teacher training so that we are prepared, the technology that's required from our Common Core standards, and the resources that students need to be successful. And then qualified teachers. We have a teacher shortage in Mississippi that tends to get pushed to the back burner because there are so many other issues, but we have a teacher shortage. Every student, as I know you agree with, deserve a high-quality certified educator. We have some classrooms where a certified math teacher is teaching science. And then more often than we like to think, we have classrooms that don't have certified teachers at all. And we made great progress this last session with teacher compensation. We still fail in comparison to what teachers deserve and what the profession needs to attract the best and the brightest. On average, our border states are $5,000 to $10,000 more per year. Other professions start salaries at $8,000 to $20,000, so our college graduates at the same level, their peers begin $8,000 to $20,000 more per year. And so, you know, this low educator wage affects our students as well. When the best and the brightest choose other professions so that they can earn a living wage and provide for family. We did spearhead the recent pay raise, and we applaud our elected officials for listening to us and to parents and to community leaders, and we do realize that this pay raise is a step in the right direction, and we're excited to keep pushing on that journey. You've got a lot of great information about that in your program booklet and also on the website that Mr. Gilbert talked about. Today, we know that research for students is done online, and many kids don't have computers at home or the access to that technology. And in affluent areas, in affluent school districts, a lot of times there isn't money to repair technology. There isn't money to replace technology. And if schools are having a hard time affording up-to-date textbooks, then we know it's a challenge for laptops and iPads and those kinds of things. So these are some of the reasons that MAE truly supports and works hard with Better Schools, Better Jobs to make sure that we can amend the Constitution to require full funding of our public schools. We have to make it the law of our land. Then, in spite of these poverty of resources for our students, we're all expected, our students are expected to perform well on our high-stakes standardized tests. As much as 30% of school time is spent preparing for and taking these tests. And that places, as educators, that places a burden sometimes on us when we feel like there is a number placed on our student, on ourselves, and on our school. Now, we want to be clear. As educators, we do support testing, and we know that testing is a way for us to guide our instruction and to make sure that we tailor our lessons to meet every individual student's needs. So testing, it's not an issue with testing. It's an issue with too much testing. It's an issue with too much emphasis on a single opportunity to evaluate our students. Now, we know parents want their children to be treated as individuals. We do too. One size does not fit all. And we know that our students are more than a test score. So let's let educators teach, and let's try to work together to put an end to some of the toxic testing that sometimes feels like it's punishment for ourselves, for our students, and our communities. We want to return that 30% of time back in to the love of learning and the love of teaching. Our students' communities, our local businesses, our towns, and our cities deserve and need thriving public schools. Thank you.
Now, before we get into the real meat of it and start hearing from our superintendents, we do need to backtrack. One individual who was supposed to be here this evening and could not make it was Representative Steve Holland, and he was going to talk a little bit about the numbers. And so, Representative Brown, looks like you got another 5 minutes. We're going to put that in your hands because I think it's important that you go through the numbers before we hear from the superintendents as they go through and our mayor. So go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Politicians are not good with time management, so I will do the best I can. Anna Maria, why don't we go to the slide that shows the sources of state funding, the $481 million. If you look at this slide here, what you see is these are the reserves that the state has on hand. Remember, we're $257 million short per year right now in full funding. But we've managed to sock away in various savings accounts $481 million that the state now has in reserves instead of beginning to fully fund MAEP. We could have taken part of that money. We could have filled up all these. We're not against reserves. We could have filled up those reserves over a period of 4 or 5 years at the same time begin to whittle down the shortfall in education funding. There's also a slide that shows the impact of underfunding over the last, from 2009 to 2015 on the various school districts in your area. It shows Tupelo, total underfunding is Tupelo School District has been underfunded since 2009, 2015, has been shorted $21 million. If you translate that into teachers' salaries, and compensation, that would have provided an additional 76 teachers. Lee County, $23 million, an additional 81 teachers. Nettleton, $5 million, an additional 17 teachers, and all of Lee County together, $48 million or an additional 174 teachers that could have, and they could, obviously the district can decide whether they need teachers, they need teacher assistants, they need computers, they need laptops, whatever they might need, just books and papers and pencils and stuff like that. And by the way, my wife's back there, she's a teacher in the Rankin County School District, and when you were talking about a leaking roof and catching a bucket, she was lying her hill, because her classroom leaks and she's got buckets in her classroom, so thank you for saying that. Okay, thank you, Kevin.
All right, thank you very much, Representative Brown. And so now that you've heard the numbers and you've seen the numbers flash before you, let's hear from our superintendents. We'll hear first from Dr. Gerald Loden, then Mr. Jimmy Weeks, and then finally Mr. Michael Cates, as they talk about their school districts and the impact of underfunding and what full funding would do for their students. All right, so we can go in that order.
I know we have a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, many of your parents and grandparents. I'd just like to see, first of all, by show of hands, if you are a parent or a grandparent of a child at school age, will you raise your hands? Several people. Thank you, thank you. I have two boys, and most of you know that are in school. And when we talk about better schools, better jobs, we're talking about 7 years before we fully fund MAEP, which means for the next 7 years, your child or your grandchild, or if you're a teacher, you'll be teaching in schools that are funded at the bottom of the nation. For the last 17 years, the best that I can find as a ranking is that Mississippi was 44th in the nation. As an educator going through and working on my master's, Arkansas and several other states had lawsuits to fund their schools. In Mississippi, we put in the MAEP program as a way to avoid the lawsuits, saying that we would fund the schools at a basic level so you could be a C in Mississippi, not a C in the United States. Today, Arkansas, for the last 5 or 6 years, has been in the top 10 in the nation. The last data I can find suggests that they're spending close to $18,000 per child, where in Mississippi we're spending below $9,000 per child. In Tupelo, we'd safely have $49 million more to spend. And we're talking about in Mississippi that we're being underfunded about $4 million a year. That's a lot of money. Now, I can say that we're Tupelo, and we're Mississippi, and we're poorer than D.C. and New York City. But now Arkansas, we have to compete with Arkansas. And I want Trey and Arthur Loden to be able to compete not just with Arkansas, but with New York and with Shanghai and everyone else. In Tupelo, we are blessed in Mississippi's terms. We have about $1,000 per child more than the state, but we're still almost $3,000 below the national average. And with the Common Core and the new models, we're expected to compete and compare ourselves. But you're asking Tupelo, Mississippi to compete, spending about $3,000 less per child, and all across the state. I'm not going to make excuses for poverty, but our reduced free lunch rates are the highest in the nation. And children in poverty can learn. But you have to have the resources and the support and the materials, and you have to have the best adults that you can find to work with the children. And you can't do that if you're not attracting the best into the profession and paying them. Our schools can do better. We're not perfect, and I'll be the first to say that, but our state can do a better job. We have to take the resources that we have and do the best that we can with them. Now, often people ask me, Dr. Loden, if you're fully funded, if better schools, better jobs, if people vote and it's passed, what would you do in Tupelo? Well, I know often people want to hear about grand things and fluffy things, but to be honest with you, Dr. Vincent years ago put us on a rotation for buying buses. We're 8 buses down right now at $80,000, $85,000 a pop, and we've got to have buses. We have been evaluated on our roofing systems and I'm told that we have some of the best roofing systems in the state. But by the way, Dr. Loden, you need $1.5 million next year. I don't have about $1 million to take care of everything. So I've got to find an additional $1.5 million. Now after that, if I could have a vision statement for our district, what would I have? We have children with a 3rd grade gate that come to us from ECEC. And we've got the data, they are kindergarten ready, way above the state average. If we just had ECEC, we'd have the highest scores in the state if ECEC was a standalone school. I would like to be able to say that we could find the funds to have an addition and expand pre-K so every child in Tupelo, Mississippi could have pre-K. On top of that, though, every child in Tupelo, Mississippi, I understand that every child is not going to go to ECEC. So, and some of the children are arriving not ready. So we need interventionists to work with them. We've cut over $2 million worth of staff the last couple of years. We need interventionists to work with our children that come to us in kindergarten through third grade that are not ready. We need interventionists to work with our ESL students. Our country, our state's becoming more diversified every day, and I'm proud of it. We have between 14 and 17 languages in Tupelo, just depending on what day of the week it is, and that makes our culture special. On top of that, a lot of you have heard about our MacBooks. We have about $4 million worth of MacBooks that are 5 to 6 years of age. We have got to get rid of the MacBooks and have our next generation of technology. And we don't have the dollars right now, even in Tupelo where we're blessed. And then a few other things that I just love to have that I know will make a difference, and we've got enough feelers out we know that help us. We have had to cut back on some of our extended school programs and summer school programs, and we have added some elementary clubs that are very popular after school. And it's really because the teachers have volunteered basically for $250 to have one, so they're very cheap. And the teachers love them. But on top of that, we need more graduation coaches at the high school, because we do have some guys that make it to the high school that are struggling with what I want to do in life, just to be able to coach them, work with them. If they're not at school, knock on the door and see what's happening, how we can help them. And we believe an ROTC program at Tupelo, Ohio would help us to save a lot of children that maybe don't have a place. I'm not really ready for band and not ready for football, just to plug them into the schools. And if you've ever had an ROTC program, you know that Tupelo, we could have 150 to 200 young people in the program, and we could develop leaders, our next generation of leaders. That's just a few things that we thought of that we'd like to have. I don't know what's going to happen with the vote. That's up to the stakeholders. One thing that Jimmy and I talked about earlier that North Mississippi has not done, Arkansas sued. There is a lawsuit out there. Tupelo has not sued. Lee County has not sued. We're stewards and we're members of the society. It's up to the voters. If we have the additional dollars, it's up to you. But remember, when you vote, it's not going to vote for us to be like Arkansas or New York City or D.C. and doubling the funding. It's going to make sure that we can be a C in Mississippi. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want my child to be a C in Mississippi. And I believe we can compete if we're provided the resources.
Good deal.
Right.
All right. And so just before we go forward, now I am a Baptist deacon, and so you notice that I'm invoking the Baptist 5-minute rule on here on our speakers, which is, you know, I'm allowing them to get all of their sermon out of them, so don't have plenty to go. Yes, sir. You're next.
Well, I'm glad of that, because Representative Brown didn't take all of Mr. Holland's 5 minutes, and I was going to ask for the rest of it. I actually spoke to a retired group of teachers at the Lee County Library last year, and they gave me 15 minutes and a talk for an hour and a half, and they finally said, "Man, you got to hush. We're supposed to eat in a minute." The first thing that I would like to reiterate and stress is something that Representative Brown said right off the bat. MAEP, the A stands for adequate. Adequate translates to minimum. Adequate is not the maximum amount of money that students are supposed to have. It's the minimum amount. It's what the standard says is an adequate amount of money so that children can be taught and that children can learn to the best of their ability. So if we're not funding that adequately, then children in this state are receiving a minimum amount. And that's what I think a lot of people that don't deal with this every day, I think they lose the meaning of that somewhere in the mix. Some things that affect our school district, affect all of us, not just Lee County, but it affects all of our community. Lee County Schools was underfunded $22.6 million since 2009. And things that translates into is lack of new buses on the rotation, just like Dr. Loden was talking about. Arts programs that are being sacrificed, and maybe if the programs aren't being sacrificed, it might be that band students are not receiving new tubas, new bass drums, new instruments that schools typically purchase for those programs. They're having to just send them back to get them repaired. Or it might be that the band simply doesn't have a tuba player this year because they don't have a tuba to play. You lose a lot in building maintenance. Dr. Loden mentioned their roof study and their roof maintenance checklist. We just completed one as well. The majority of our roofs in our district are in excellent shape, but we have one right now that was graded an F, and to replace that roof is going to cost us $180,000. I don't have that yet. I've got to find it somewhere, or we're going to be just like they were talking about, teachers spending more time on rainy days running around and moving pots and garbage cans than they are going to be spending on teaching. When we talk about our high stakes testing, you know, a great big push now in testing is for everything to be online. And I think that online testing is great because when you begin to test online, the turnaround time for your testing scores is a matter of days now instead of a matter of months. So if we can test in May and we can receive our test scores by the 1st of June or by the middle of June, we effectively have a month to a month and a half that we can use that data to plan our instruction for the next year so that we can see where weak spots are in our curriculum and we can tighten things up a little bit. But when you're looking at a cost of $200,000 just to get the infrastructure on one campus, not your entire district, but one campus, so that all of the students on that campus can take a test online at the same time without shutting the system down, $200,000 doesn't really sound like a whole lot of money when you're looking at it, but when you've got 14 campuses, all of a sudden $200,000 translates into a lot of money. And it's just like Dr. Loden said, we're blessed in our area. We live, you know, we live in a wealthy community, wealthy part of the state. When I think about other school districts in our state that don't have the wealth that we have, I don't know how in the world they will rise to meet those challenges. One thing that was mentioned earlier was the teacher pay raise. Our teachers across this state needed that pay raise. There's no doubt about it, and I applaud the legislature for what they did in that. But folks, certified teachers aren't the only employees that we have in school districts. That pay raise did not take into account that teacher's assistant who's been working in the classroom for 20 years. It didn't take into account the ladies in the cafeteria who get there at 6 o'clock in the morning and start cooking, and they get their 8 hours in by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And districts had a very tough decision that they had to make. They had to decide whether or not certified teachers were the only employees that were going to get a raise, or were they somehow going to bite the bullet to make sure that everyone in that school district received a comparable pay raise. Some districts did and some didn't. For those districts that did, that additional amount of money that they committed to for those non-certified employees, that's not a one-time expense. That expense is recurring yearly. So if those additional pay raises cost your district $500,000, it's $500,000 a year every year from now on. When we look at other things that districts have done, this was something that I never did understand. A lot of school districts decided that in trimming their budgets that they were going to do away with their maintenance programs and the cleaning of their buildings, and they were going to ask their teachers to clean their campuses. Now let me say this, I don't think anybody is too good to sweep a classroom. I see several of my old teachers in here, and y'all know my daddy, and from the time I was 8 years old, he had me sweeping and mopping Church Street School, and I did it for years. So I certainly don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is I want my teachers focusing on instruction, and I want my teachers focusing on the children that are in their classrooms, instead of taking time that they could be using for planning, time that they could be using to put materials together for a quality lesson, to sweep the floors and dump the garbage cans. Other parts of underfunding that school districts have to deal with are certain mandates that we're required to maintain. One of those is a fund balance from year to year. If you do not maintain that certain percentage of your fund balance, then your district will lose its accreditation. So how is it that you can tell a district, I'm not going to give you as much money as I have given you in the past, but you've still got to perform at the same level or better, and oh, by the way, if you spend a little too much money, you're going to lose your accreditation. It's kind of like tying my hands behind my back and then expecting me to step in the ring for a championship fight. It just doesn't work very well. One thing that districts were faced with this last year, I don't know if you've paid a lot of attention to it, but we had a new attendance rule that went into place. It's called the 63% attendance rule. And what that translates into is that in order for a student to be counted present, he's got to be present 63% of the instructional day. You ask me what time of the day is 63%? Well, I don't know, because it depends on the child. And it depends on whether or not he's in elementary or junior high. And it depends on whether or not he's in first grade and they go to lunch at 11, or he's in fifth grade and they don't go to lunch until 12. So it's a moving target that there was no uniform way to hit that. So what that translated into for my district was our absenteeism increased by almost 1,500 for the district. Now, 1,500 absences out of 7,300 kids, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start looking at dollars, it's $315,000. Those kids were at school. They came, they didn't leave. They just weren't there 1 or 2 days out of the 3-month time frame that the state looks at your attendance. So if you've got 20 extra kids absent, it's not a classroom that you can shut down. It's not a teacher that you don't need anymore, and it's not a bus that you can't run down the road. It's one day that a child wasn't there, and it translated to $315,000, which, by the way, translated to 5 teachers that we were not able to reemploy this year. I'm going to make a statement here. I'm certainly not speaking for Dr. Loden, and I'm not speaking for Mr. Cates. I don't have any problem with financial accountability. I think you as taxpayers and I think you as voters should hold me accountable for the finances in my school district. And if I don't do a good enough job with that, then at the end of my term, you have an opportunity to vote me out, and that's what you should do. Throwing money at school districts may not be the answer. Now, I agree with Representative Brown. We don't know because ain't nobody thrown it at us, and if it did, they didn't tell me when the game was. I didn't catch our share. But folks, taking money away from us is not the answer either. I just don't think that you can expect school districts to perform and students to perform at the same level when you don't give us the same means with which to shoot for those goals.
And your Baptist 5 minutes are up.
Thank
you for that. Mr. Cates? Yes, sir.
Hey, Kevin. I'm Michael Cates. I've been in education 28 years, and from the very beginning, been fundraising to be able to provide for my students. The state of Mississippi has never funded education like it should have. From the start. Band directors, coaches, art teachers have dug into their pocketbook to pay for what the students needed. They went to parents. I've had students go door to door selling things. No one wants to do that. But it's been necessary. I don't know if it'll ever stop. Hopefully that our lawmakers will look at this and understand that no longer is it about giving the child the education they deserve. It's about survival. In the Nelton School District, we are surviving. We were underfunded $5 million since 2009. Yes, we could have hired 17 teachers if we'd had that funding. And we needed it because our test scores were falling. But of course, we didn't have it, so we had to make do. So we had to dig into our reserve fund. We were lucky. Our school board had put money back. So we kept purchasing technology. But we couldn't do technology and also take care of our buildings. So something had to suffer. Our buses and our campuses, they suffered. Over half of our classrooms right now have old window units. You cannot buy these units that are large enough anymore to cool these classrooms. All 3 of our gyms have no air. The students come to PE, 102 degrees out, no air. Open the door, turn all the fans on you can. Our buildings are in major need of repair, both inside and out. We have many roofs that if we don't repair them as soon as possible, we're going to be putting buckets everywhere. Many of the floors are patched together. If you can find tile, we'll take it. Doesn't matter what color, doesn't have to match. Just to get by. The average age of our buildings are 40-year-old. That's average. We have some buildings built in the 30s. The 40% of our buses are older than the recommended 10 years age. The state recommends 10 years, do away with a bus. 40% of ours are over 10-year-old. Over the last 4 years, the cost of providing supplies and resources needed for our students to be successful, both in the classroom and on the field, has increased while our funding has been reduced. During this time, the state has also changed the curriculum without any additional funding to cover the cost of transition. The transition included additional training for our teacher, administration training, new textbooks, and additional material to meet the rigor of the new testing. No funding for this. We have tightened our belt. We're tightening our belt notches after notches just to be able to provide the education possible where our facilities are suffering. We've been cutting our reserve fund year after year, $500,000 a year. Our saving account is running out. And we have no more notches in our belt. Something has to change. Please help us. Thank you.
Let's give all of these superintendents a round of applause. And I want to take this opportunity just to commend you guys for the work that you're doing in the conditions that you're faced with. And you know, I have an opportunity to travel across the country and visit schools across the country. And I've said this on numerous occasions that, you know, my wife each morning takes my boys to the Madison County School District, which is a pretty good school district. I have an 8-year-old that's in elementary school. I have a 13-year-old that's a 7th grader. But it's still, we have to think about the fact that there's another 8-year-old and another 13-year-old who's going to a school that's not quite as fortunate as they are. And I think that we all have to realize that together we have to do something about it until every single student in this state can be given the same opportunity to learn. We got a long way to go. You guys need to be commended for the work that you're doing and continue to do the work that you are. Let's give it up for the passion that we have. But we'd like to end it there, but we're not going to end it there because we still have to hear more about this work that has to be done. And we're going to hear from 2 individuals here, and I'm going to kind of introduce what they're going to talk about so they can just roll right into it. And then we've also been joined by Representative Steve Holland, who's joined us. Let's give him a round of applause. I will give him his Baptist 5 minutes at the end so that he can...
I'm a Methodist, brother. Okay. I don't need 5 minutes. We sprinkle, we don't dub.
All right, very well then. I'll take that as well. So, one thing we do know, and Mayor Shelton mentioned this in his introduction and his welcome to us, is how important it is for the communities to rally around their schools and to support. And we know that also it's important that our schools are successful for economic development. and what that means for our schools. So Mayor Shelton is going to talk about public education being a critical key to economic development. When he's finished, we're going to hear from Casey Grist, who's going to talk to us about the importance of the community working together in a grassroots effort through the Better Schools, Better Jobs ballot initiative. And we're going to see how the infusion of economics and the community are working together to help support public education. So, Mayor, your time is in. Your time is now.
Okay, just let me know. I am a Baptist.
Well, see, I'm confused now. I said a Baptist 5 minutes, but the Methodist said he doesn't need 5 minutes, so we will be somewhere in between.
Well, I am a Baptist, so let me know if I get.
You get your Baptist 5.
They cut me off at lunch today, so I'm used to it.
You're fine.
But again, as mayor of Tupelo, I have tried to campaign on, and I just believe strongly in promoting our public school district. Fortunately, with Dr. Loden and Tupelo Public School District, it's easy to have opportunities to brag. I get to brag over and over on the quality of our facilities, the quality of our educators, and just the great things that are going on in the Tupelo Public School District. I believe that we have the best staff of teachers and administrators and staff that we've ever had. But I also believe very strongly that the future of the Tupelo public school system and the future of the city of Tupelo are one and the same. I think that if one is successful, the other is going to be successful. But if one is not successful, the other is going to also struggle. When we talk about public education, we talk about the funding, and you've heard the superintendents talk about the impact that it has on them. In the city of Tupelo, we make great efforts to make investments in tourism, to make investments in economic development, to make investments in our infrastructure. But as you've heard the educators say, if we don't also make investments in our schools, just like our roads, they're going to begin to crumble. We have to make those investments. In Tupelo, we take great pride in economic development. You hear over and over, you see in the paper, you see on the news, the accolades given to our region, the CDF, our partners in economic development, for the things that they have done. We were recently selected by Site Selection magazine as the #2 area in the country for economic development. But these things are not possible without a strong public education system. The success of our economic development partners is just not possible without a strong public education system. Our ambassadors at CDF would not be able to go recruit these companies, these Fortune 500 companies, these international companies, if you can't prove to these companies that you have a competitive workforce in your region. And your region cannot produce that competitive workforce without the public education system, without the strong public education system. I believe wholeheartedly that schools, our education system, and especially our public education system, is an economic development tool. That is an economic development facilitator in and of itself. Toyota, for example, spent a great deal of time before they made the decision to come to this area touring our public schools, touring the Tupelo schools, the Lee County schools, Pontotoc and Union County schools. And they just would not have made the decision to come here without knowing that this is an area with strong public schools. The same can be said for Grammar and Yokohama near West Point. These industries represent thousands of jobs in our state and are absolutely critical to our local economy. And again, these companies are not going to choose to locate here if we don't provide that strong, competent workforce. And imagine, especially with the downturn in the furniture industry, what would happen if Toyota didn't come here? Well, we've lost thousands of jobs that were replaced by Toyota that came here because of our commitment to public education. As a state and as a region, to get another Toyota here, to get another Yokohama, to get these companies, we'd spend $100 million at the drop of the hat. The representatives here can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that our state officials would provide whatever incentives needed to get Toyota here or to get Yokohama here. But we're missing the point if we don't fund what it takes to get them here. It doesn't matter how many hundreds of millions of dollars we're willing to provide for one of these Fortune 500 companies. They're not coming if we can't produce the workers that are required to make their businesses successful. So I think that the fully funding of the Mississippi Adequate Education Program, it's not just the right thing to do. It's not just a good thing to do. It's not just something that makes us feel good. It is benefiting the economy of the state of Mississippi. It's from our cities to our counties to our region to the state itself. And you know, if we want our economy to grow, that's just an investment we have to make. I don't think that it's an option. To continue to grow our schools and economy, we've heard it. I've heard it all my life. I see a lot of my former teachers here and in the schools. I've heard it my whole life. We've got to stop the brain drain out of the state of Mississippi. We have to do more to keep our best and brightest here. The funding of the Mississippi Adequate Education Program is our opportunity to do that. You know, we've talked about it as long as I've been alive and probably longer, and we have the opportunity as a state to do that, and I think it's time that we do that. As a son of a public school teacher, I'm very proud of that. I know firsthand the hours that the teachers put in, the long, hard hours that they put in and have to put in to do their jobs. As you heard Dr. Loden and the other superintendents state, now those same teachers are being asked to do more with less resources. So, you know, as I said, it's not a matter of fairness. It's a matter of the ability to function, the ability to do your job. And how do we ask teachers to, you know, to enact the new curriculum, to enact the new standard, to fulfill all of the requirements and the mandates, but oh, by the way, we're not going to pay you what we pay other people. We're not going to fix your building. We're not going to provide you with the tools and the resources that you need to do your job. And so if we're going to keep those people, if we're going to recruit the teachers, we have to make the decisions, the political decisions, the tough choices to fund our schools. You heard Representative Brown go over the statistics of the school district, of Tupelo School District, of Lee County School District, and you're talking about this program alone, around $50 million essentially being taken out of the Tupelo and Lee County economy. And when we think about that, that's not just money that's, you know, being taken out of the economy in a vacuum. It's not like you just didn't get the check and, you know, I'm sorry. When you talk about funding, this $50 million, you're talking about hiring teachers. And I forget, I think it was, what was my number of teachers? I lost my notes. But the number of teachers that would have for Tupelo and Lee County.
174.
174 teachers in just the Tupelo-Lee County area. Most likely that's 174 spouses. That's you know, a large number of children. That's the people that buy houses. Those are the people that go eat in the restaurants. Those are the people that go shopping in the mall or the shops or the boutiques. They get their hair cut here. They literally make our economy move. You know, so it's not just the $50 million that the schools have shortchanged, but it's exponentially impacted for our city when you take not just those teachers out of the economy, but you take their spouses, their families, the grandparents that come to visit, the kids for the soccer games. It's all circular, but it has a very real impact on the city of Tupelo, on Lee County, and every city across the state. So, when we talk about funding education, it's obviously we have to have the buses, we have to have the roofs, but it is an economic development issue, and we're shortchanging ourselves by not making that commitment to the adequate education program. Additionally, in addition to the shopping and the eating, as a city, I'm learning it's pretty important, the ad valorem tax base of that property ownership. These are the people that will pay those taxes that allow the city to maintain its basic city services. When cities lose that ad valorem tax base, when you lose your sales tax revenue, and you see it in different parts of the state, but the cities lose your basic ability to provide those city services. And that can all be avoided by, in my opinion, making the commitment as a state, as a citizen, as a collective group of citizens, that we're going to require the state of Mississippi to keep its promise to our school district and fully fund the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. I told Anna Maria I'd use one quote from her. I said it was in Jackson, but we're here in the hometown of Elvis Presley, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't invoke the spirit of Elvis Presley and use a word from one of his songs. But when it comes to adequate education in Mississippi, it's time for a little less talk and a lot more action.
Amen. That's good. Thank you very much. All right.
I'm not going to begin. I'm going to yield to the gentleman from Robert E. Lee County. I'd rather you go ahead and do your do. Now, I realize that's a risk I'm taking because I may never get the mic back.
I promise you can get the mic back pretty quick. I apologize for being late. The King James Version says, "Let the dead bury the dead," but I've never seen it happen. Which gives me full employment, of course. But 31 years you've chosen, either hopefully out of your wisdom or either because there hadn't been anybody else any better to run for this job, and I've held it 31 years in this legislature. And I think the thing that I would say generically about education, there's nothing generic about education, but people like Cecil Brown and myself literally have to get up every morning now in the legislature and break the mirror first thing to get all of our aggressions out so that we don't choke somebody for lack of passion by 10 o'clock in the morning. There is no passion in the Mississippi legislature right now for any progressive programs, especially education. Now, I don't care whether you like what I say or not. You can get up and leave if you want to, because I'm telling you the truth. You do not have majority leadership right now in the legislature that is championing the cause of public education. That's a fact. That's a fact. So, I have 2 of my 4 children that are public school teachers, and I'm proud of that. Can't get any of them to be undertakers. I've tried. But it's a shame what they make in salary. It is an absolute disgrace at what they make, and we offered what would have been a really nice pay raise this year, and it got whittled down. Superintendent Weeks, yes, we're proud of what we got, but it wasn't nearly what it should be, no more than any of the other funding of education. When you've almost got $500 billion in the reserve accounts of the state of Mississippi, and what your leadership is interested in now is putting more money in that accounts so they march out next year when they run for re-election and try to give you money back. You really need to say bah humbug to them is what you need to say. That it is absolutely ludicrous that that's a game plan when we have the needs that we have in public education. My granddaughter is at Lawhorn, and Dr. Loden, Mississippi's #1 superintendent. And I'll tell you, It's all I can do when I go see her at Lawhorn. I love that school. That's where Elvis went to school. And I go in and I go to her programs, all of her little arts and these kinds of things, and go into her classroom. And honest to God, it's all I can do to hold back the tears, because I think we've got a great education going. But we need more. We need a lot more. That's where it's happening. That's where my granddaughter's mind is being molded. And I am so proud of the education that she's getting. Mr. Cates, I'm a product of your school district, of course, and I love it very dearly. I think the third poorest school district in the state of Mississippi, if I'm not badly mistaken on my figures, does a remarkable job, but with much less. So we have to remember these impoverished districts as well, which is what MAEP is all about, to not penalize a kid because of their birthright or where they're born. But that school does a good job. We've got some good things going on, but we've got a lot of money in the state bank that could make them go a whole lot better. And I'm fighting to keep my passion, I don't mind telling you, because it's pretty discouraging right now after 31 years to sit where I sit and to not be able to penetrate the inner sanctum, the holy of holies of the leadership, when it is so unimpressive and so lacking in passion for virtually anything except to give Cook Retire $19 million every time they shout, or Cervicor, or any other big dog that walks in a 30-minute special session and gets what the hell they want. Now that's what happens. That's the kind of legislature you elected, and you can do something about it next year if you want to. You can wake up and you can get passionate about it, or you're going to stay in the same mire you're in. Period.
We had a former mayor of Jackson used to have a show called Bottom Line, and that, my friends, is the bottom line.
Well, I didn't want to follow Frank Melton, and I sure don't want to follow Steve Holland, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I'm going to keep this quick so that Anna Maria doesn't start waving her arms at me. I know we're over time, but my message to you is simple. We need your help. How many of you had an opportunity to sign the petition to put Initiative 42 on the ballot? That's amazing. In talking, you know, one of the things in Mississippi is we succeed because nobody tells us we can't. You know, we've had to. We have to do things that other people can't do. We have to make do with less. We have to do this over and over. When we finished this project of getting these signatures to put this initiative on the ballot, I was talking to some of our friends who have left our state and are in D.C. and other places, and I was asking them, how do we do this? How do we go forward with this? And they said, you don't seem to understand. Do you know how many other states have tried this over and over and over again and have never gotten the signatures necessary to put it on the ballot? Well, I didn't know because nobody told us it was hard. You know, we just did it. They just told us to go out and get 200,000 signatures in 18 weeks, and nobody told us that that was a hard thing to do. And Sally Gray and I know because we drove to about 15 counties a day harassing people and driving these superintendents crazy to get these signatures. But you helped with that. The citizenry of our state has spoken. They want to see this issue on our ballot in 2015. Now, a couple of things have to happen so that that can be possible. Number one, we have to stop any effort from the Mississippi legislature to offer an alternative to this measure. Make no mistake, any vote for any alternative to what has already been placed on the ballot will be a vote to kill this initiative. So, the first thing I need for you to do between now and January 1st is please contact your local legislator. Let them know that. Because you're going to hear things like, well, it's just going to make it a little better. We're just going to offer an alternative plan, and it's just going to make it a little bit better. What do you think is going to happen when there's two things on the ballot in 2015? It's going to die because people are going to be confused and they don't know which one to vote for, and so half's going to go here and half's going to go there. The whole thing's going to fail, and we're not going to. This is it, folks. This is our last shot at funding public education in Mississippi. And as hard as it may be to believe, there are people in our state who want exactly that. There are people in our state who want to do away with public education. And I never thought, I mean, I grew up here in Tupelo. That never crossed my mind. But I'm telling you, it is alive and well and happening every day in our state. So the first thing I'm asking you to do is don't wait, just tomorrow. Just call them up. Call your local legislator and just let them know how you feel. We've already seen it happening with some of our legislators who are going to the leadership and saying, man, we don't want to take this on. Our people have spoken. 8,000 people in Lee County signed that petition. That's a lot of folks. That's in 18 weeks. What do you think we could have gotten if we'd have had all the way to January to get those signatures? So that's my first thing. The second thing is we're going to have to pass this thing now. We've got it on the ballot, and now we're going to have to make sure it passes. It's Initiative 42. The language will be written so that the answer is yes, simple as it can be. We're going to need your help to get it done. It's going to be election year anyway. You're going to get campaigned out. But I need your email address. If you didn't sign that list out there and put your email address, please do so before you leave, because it's going to be imperative that we're able to come to your community and come to your county and call on you to help get your friends and your family out to support this issue. Our superintendents know it's true. Our mayor knows it's true. Our legislators know it's true. This is it. If we don't do this now, and like, sorry to say Speaker Brown. That kind of sounds good, doesn't it? What Representative Brown has said is true. If we don't do it now while we have money, we're never going to do it. So it's imperative that you help us. We're just asking you to help us today. I know I went off script a little bit and I didn't follow any of my slides, and that's not unusual for me, if anybody knows me very much. But you know, it is amazing what's happening here. I'm a product of the Tupelo public school system. I have a son that started 6th grade this year at Milam, and he's the 4th generation in my family to attend that school. That means something to me, and I'm so proud of the level of education that my children receive and that I received. I'm so proud of these superintendents here. Can you imagine, with what these guys have to offer, what we could do if we gave them a little money? If we did throw money at them, can you imagine what could happen? And, you know, also I'm just pleased to be here. I'm so pleased to see Mayor Shelton, who we have been so fortunate that whether we have had Democrats or Republicans in this office, we have had pro-education mayors, and I really appreciate your service, Mayor Shelton, as well. But, you know, as we leave, I just want to ask you to help us move forward. If the Anna Maria is pointing, that's our website, betterms.org. Go, you can sign on there to be a helper. If you've signed the petition, we've got your name. Please sign out here. I'm going to come calling here in a few months and ask you to help us. Get your friends and family to support this initiative, and let's get education funded where it needs to be in Mississippi.
All right. Thank you very much. Wow. I tell you what, the passion that was just exhibited here is phenomenal. Well, I was given a hard stop time, and we are really knocking on the door. So what does it mean for our districts and our communities to work together to get this not only passed, but get the change we need in the state to put the emphasis where it's supposed to be, and that's on our students?
I've got to go back to what Casey was saying. As superintendents, we've all said that this is a double-edged sword. You're putting all of your cards out on the table to see how the people of Mississippi really feel about public schools. People at times will talk about the days of old. If you go back, Mississippi's always been last in funding. And then the indicators that you would like to be good at, we're typically not. And we may have great football teams, but as far as education, we're lagging behind. And now the die's been cast. We need to have people to say if they're going to support the schools or not. Like I alluded to earlier, if everything is passed, you're still not funding Mississippi in the top half of the nation. You'll be about number 43 or number 44. So we're not asking for Mississippi to be with Arkansas that's in the top 10. We're asking for Mississippi to at least have enough so you can take care of the roofs, the buses, open the doors, have textbooks, and adequate class sizes.
To follow up on Dr. Loden's statement, you know, the thing that I look at after 3 decades plus is we used to have teacher meetings. Now I say teacher also included the PTAs, the greater community, in this community right here that would literally draw hundreds on multiple occasions to support public education when we did the 1-cent sales tax, all kinds of things that I can think of over time. I don't know if it's this dad-blamed computer or what it is that's got everybody sitting low and maybe not thinking as much, and certainly you're the choir I'm speaking to because you're here, but I think we're going to have to get some kind of really sensational grassroots efforts in KC. Maybe this is it. I hope it is. To renew that spirit, to realize that nothing prospers. Nothing really prospers till the public education prospers as a whole in this state, and it's going to take voting. We've got to get away from all this business. Now, I mean, let's just lay it out on the cards. Y'all had me 31 years. Get rid of me if you want to. Mass an effort and get rid of me. But you've also had Nancy Collins and Brian Aldridge and Jerry Turner up here, and everybody in this county and around this county now has a GOP label by their name, and that's okay. If they'd support education, I wouldn't care if they were communist. But by gosh, you have to force them to do it. And you elect those people, and you elect me. So make me accountable and make them accountable is my point. And to do it, you got to do it with a grassroots effort.
Any of our other superintendents want to chime in on that same question? We don't want to follow that. Mr. Mayor.
We got 3 or 4.
Okay. So now we got questions going. Okay. Go ahead. Yes, sir, young man.
Yes, sir. To the superintendents, I was just wondering, from Dr. Loden, from Tupelo down to Nettleton, how you go back to separate but equal. This is not separate, and it sure as hell isn't equal. How do you, I mean, we got to address it. And MAP, like you pointed out, is a minimum education. And I don't want that for our kids. We can't afford that. So Nettleton's got to get a lot more help than Tupelo's got, but we got to get out of the ditch. It's time.
And if I could say this, the MAEP is a take it from Peter to pay Paul model. The poor districts will receive more like $4,500 each. The state gives us about $3,600 to $3,700. You know, the one thing I laugh about is the charter schools, because KIPP and all the big models, they're not coming into Mississippi. We can't find charter schools from Mississippi except for fly-by-night ones because they're not going to make money off of Mississippi. When you receive about $4,500 a child, you can't open the doors. I guess that's my soapbox.
Others?
One thing I would add to that kind of goes back to what Representative Holland said just a little bit ago. I asked someone a couple of months ago to see if they could find out, you know, about some things with education and what was going on down in Jackson, and the response I got from that person, the man in Jackson he spoke to, was, do what you want to do. You don't have the votes to beat me anyway. So my response to my friend was, well, you know what? They said that on the school start date last year. Yeah. And you know what? Yeah. We got that taken care of. So your legislators will listen to you, especially if you call them and say, hey, look, I'm not going to vote for you if you don't do this. 1 or 2 calls they don't listen to, but 6 or 7 or 10 or 200, they start getting a little nervous. And that's what they're there for, folks. Don't hesitate to call them.
All right. Did you want to? Okay.
Jane Riley.
How much does the presence of large number of private schools in Mississippi affect the public school funding, particularly in view of public in the legislature?
Kevin?
Okay.
Well, first of all, private schools don't get any money from, just making sure everybody in the audience knows that. We've got about 40,000 kids across the state in private schools, about 40,000. We've got 460 to 480,000 kids in public school. 90% of all kids in Mississippi go to public schools, 90%. 80% of all white kids in Mississippi go to public schools. Public schools dominate this state. Everybody essentially goes to public schools. So they don't have any impact. They may have an impact on an individual legislator who has a child in a private school or has constituents that are supporters of private schools. But I want to go back to what the superintendent said. And what Steve has said, next year is an election year. What is the number one issue on every member of the legislature's mind? Re-election. I'd like to tell you it's public schools. That ain't it. They're thinking about re-election. So you tie this to re-election and you do what he said and call them up. Let me tell you something. I've got 26,000 constituents. If I get 3 phone calls about an issue, it is a tidal wave. It's like 10,000 people out there thinking about it and not calling. So if you start calling, you ain't got to call many times. You don't have to have many people to call. But you don't need to let them argue and tell you that you're wrong. You are right. Don't listen to all their stuff. Don't listen. You don't need to get into the technicalities of it. Just say either you support this or we're going to beat you. That's the line. Whether they're Republicans or Democrats. You don't have to say this is the right. Don't try to convince them it's right or wrong. They're not thinking about that. They're thinking about re-election. The idea is either you support this or we're going to beat you. That is the message.
All right. Go ahead. Go.
I was just going to say, as a new elected official, I can tell you it'll work. I've only gotten one letter of a person saying that they weren't going to vote for me, and if I didn't get his yard cleaned up from the tornado, he had my name misspelled and the letter misspelled, but his yard was clean that day. In my introductions also, one of our, Danny Spratler, one of our state board members is here, and I apologize for not recognizing you, but certainly thank you for being here.
All right, we're going to have one more question in the back, and then we're going to bring Anna Maria up, who wants to give us a benediction, and then I think we're going to be ready to go home. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Christy Brewer. We just have a question. With so much being pumped into the reserve and into the savings, the question is, how does that benefit the state, the money that is in the savings and the reserve?
Well, I served 28 years on appropriations till this tidal wave came. There is a difference in the two trains of philosophy. The current majority leadership is a conservative leadership. The leadership that I used to be a part of, I guess, is more termed a liberal leadership, who thinks the government does good, and probably the government's greatest good is public education, quite frankly, closely followed by public safety and transportation, or at least that's my opinion of it. It looks good if you're a conservative to have a good bit of money in the bank. I'm not opposed to that. Believe it or not, the only thing in 8 years of serving with Kirk Fordyce that we ever agreed on was a 2% set aside to build this rainy day fund. You've got to have some reserves. I'm a businessman. I can't have a zero bank balance every day because I can't pay my help. I can't pay my mortgage. I can't pay taxes to the Tupelo City School District, you know? But a government's role to me is much like a church. If you're going to bank a bunch of money, you're not doing your mission, and you're not fulfilling your responsibility to take care of the needs of people in a mass situation. So, I mean, I think they think they're looking good and following their mantra to keep banking money and banking money. It's flush. It's as full as it can get, you know? And the state is pulling out of the recession at a fairly reasonable rate. So when they tell you there's not enough money, that's just a lie. There is more money to spend, and we can keep a reasonable reserve and yet spend that down on things that you've heard about tonight that we're concerned about, and you will see the boat rise for all of us, I think.
Well, I'm small, so I have to lower it. My name is Anna Maria, and I am the communications consultant to the Mississippi Association of Educators, and I'm not on the agenda, but I'm coming up to just chat with you for a moment. When you join us on email, and Casey is going to get a copy of your email, and we'll have your email address. We have at MAE the only statewide education legislative action online where you can go on, we will send you an email, you can click, go bling, bing, 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 and boom, your email goes to our esteemed representatives and our senators. And we'll do the, you do this every day with other things that other organizations. We have it too. Join with us. We promise that together we will flood those email addresses with your letters. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for participating in this organization.
Let's give our panelists a round of applause. We want to thank you for being here this evening. And just always remember, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not the darkness, that most frightens us. If there's one thing we're going to get from tonight is that together we can make a difference in the lives of these students across the state of Mississippi. Thank you for your attendance this evening. Thank you for the passion that was given here tonight. And we are now dismissed.
Good job, man.